in Sheffield, and I'm here with Paul Sung, and had his world premiere of Tish, a new documentary about Tish Murtha. Paul, thanks so much for talking to me today, and congratulations on your amazing world premiere. It was a fantastic night.
Yeah, thank you. It was quite overwhelming because you make these films and the best way to see them is with an audience, and seeing the love in that room for Tish, for Ella, and the people in the pictures was really wonderful.
I know your films. I love, actually, we met originally on this podcast radio show, and I think you have a really distinct perspective on what you choose. And I just firstly wanted to ask a very simple question as why did you want to make a film about Tish Murtha specifically?
Seen Tish's work online for the first time, and the first image that really captivated me was the ones of Tish's brother sort of jumping out of the from a scheme on the first floor onto some mattresses, and I remember doing that in my childhood in the 80s in southeast London, and it's just a great photograph. You've got everybody is looking at this boy jumping off the roof, which is actually Tish's brother Glenn, and then you've got one of Tish's other brothers, Mark, who's holding this dummy, and everyone is, including Mark, is looking at Glenn jumping out of the window onto these mattresses, except the dummy, and the dummy is looking at Tish, and I don't know whether that was deliberate or not, but it's just amazing. And the more I saw of her work, the more she became an inspiration. And then not only was she a fantastic photographer, she was also a brilliant writer and political. And Ella and I had, met online and were friends online, and we'd never met in person. And we were chatting about something. I'd edited a photography book and was working on another one, and Ella had recommended a photographer to me. And then I sort of just messaged her and said, have you ever thought about doing a documentary about your mum? And she said, I've been approached, but it's not something I'd want to do. And so I said, well, if you ever change your mind, let's have a chat. And she said, well, let's have a chat anyway. So we had this phone call, and it lasted for about 2 hours. And, we just really got on. And I think Ella could see that this kind of film that I was interested in making with her would be very collaborative. So we met up in Newcastle, and I think this was around about after the first lockdown, so a few years back. And we got on well in person. And so we then found our producer, Jen Corcoran. And Jen is from the Northeast, as is Ella. And it was very important to us that in making a film about a working class female photographer from the Northeast, that the team that made it, was representative of that. And of course, Jen and Ella are. And then we brought in a woman called Holly Galloway as our cinematographer, who's also from the Northeast and working class. And off we went. And so, for me, it was, I'm interested in stories about people who maybe haven't been recognised enough, whether that's in their lifetime or not. And I'm also interested in stories about people who challenge the status quo, and Tish certainly did that. So I think it was one of those projects that you always. I think I've always wanted to sort of make stories about people that maybe not always completely unknown, because Tish certainly wasn't completely unknown, but someone who hadn't really received the due that they deserved. And so that's how we went. We did a Kickstarter to raise our initial budget. And then we got some funding from Screen Scotland and from BFI Doc Society Fund. And then BBC came in and commissioned the film too. So, yeah, it's been a journey.
One of the things that really hit me about seeing the film is how, actually Peter Bradshaw said it was a humane tribute. And I just feel like the way that you shared her story was really emotional, and I didn't expect to get so emotional, and I think I did, especially after the Q&A and everything like that. It seems like you had a really good rapport, as you said, with Ella. She mentioned something in the Q&A around you guys having a similar background, and so how did that dynamic in the relationship grow over time?
Well, yeah, one of the first things that Ella and I spoke about was, being only children, and having been from single parent families, our mums raising us, alone, and being the centre of your mum's world. And, that very much, Ella says it in the film, it was me and Tish against the world. And with my mum, it was very much like that. And, Tish made sacrifices for Ella. My mum made sacrifices for me. And I think when you have that in common with someone, you've got an initial thing to form a bond around. So that's just what kicked us off. And then I think, you know, the film, Ella often says, she said the film could have only been made by me, you and Jen, you know, and I think that's right, because the challenges that you have to overcome when you make any film are considerable. And especially making a documentary, you know, the funding for indie feature documentaries in the UK is limited. So I think it's very important that if you have a team, that they are very much, one, committed, but two, trust each other, have one another's backs, you know, and that I consider them both friends. It's been a brilliant film to work on, you know, not only in terms of creatively, but also in terms of like, nourishing me, you know, as a person and as a filmmaker.
The other thing I just, as I kept watching the film, I'm a huge fan of the film, like Chris Marker and La Jetée. And I think every bit of your film, the way you handled the artwork, from the filmmaking and the editing, I thought was elegant. And I just thought there was just something so beautiful about everything being put together. So your editor was incredible as well. So how did you think first how did you come with the idea on how to approach sharing someone else's art, which is quite beautiful as if you just look at it as a, you know, like in a gallery or something like that?
Yeah, it was a real gift that Tish has, you know, a formidable body of work, despite not, you know, receiving the adulation and acclaim that she deserved in her lifetime. You know, she did take a lot of photographs, a lot of which have never been seen. So we had those, and we set one rule quite early on, which was that Tish framed those pictures, and you know, and the composition, everything that was set in stone. We didn't want to be like, you know, zooming in on them or making them 3D or anything like that. We wanted them to be as they were. So we had all that. What we didn't have, there's no archive of Tish really, you know. So we had to think about how do we bring her to life in the film beyond photography. So for those scenes, I had the idea that we could, rather than it be straight ahead reconstruction, I thought about what we called a memory space. So Jen found a sort of disused Marks and Spencer on Darlington High Street that was available for artists if they had sort of some kind of artistic endeavour or enterprise that would be there. So basically we built a set there, and we were very lucky. A guy called Richard Drew, who was you know, a fan of Tish's work and is a production designer. He had designed the set for the Ricky Gervais show Afterlife, and so he had, you know, some materials, and so I think he found the original schematics for what was Ella and Tish's home at one point, and he basically just designed it, and then it was built in this M&S. And I mean, Ella came on set and was, you know, I think she had goosebumps just thinking how eerily it looked. And the other production designer who had Siam Colvine, she created Tish's world from nothing, you know, from furnishing it to making it look like how Tish's house would look, because Tish used to put she used to curate her walls, and so she would put her work and things she was interested in on, you know, on a wall in front of the mantelpiece. And so that then, you know, bringing in Shin Fei Chen, who sort of plays Tish's presence, gives you that sense of, you know, we're watching her work, we're seeing her and observing her. And then Maxine Peake was a natural choice for narrator, because one, she's brilliant, two, her politics, and you know, she was already a fan of Tish. And then it, you know, when it came to the edit, you know, we were thinking about how do we actually, you know, like, what is the balance between seeing Ella in conversation with people who knew Tish, seeing the photographs, what else are the other kind of elements of the story? So, you know, seeing contact sheets, seeing negatives. And we had, you know, two really brilliant editors, Lindsay Watson and Angela Slavin. And I think for them as well, I mean, Lindsay, you know, knows a lot about photography, and really, you know, some of the ideas that she came up with about around how we present those photographs are really key. And Ella is, you know, as the custodian of Tish's legacy, knows those images better than anyone. And so at some point, Ella was able to sort of come in and say, no, put this picture there, no, that one there. And really to be guided by that was really useful, because, you know, you might have ideas about where things are going to go, but, you know, Ella is a curator, you know, in terms of Tish's work. Nobody in the world knows it better than Ella. And yeah, it was, I mean, edits are always, you have moments, I think, where I do anyway, on every film I've ever worked on, there's a moment where I think, we haven't got this, you know, we've we've got to reshoot, or we've got to do, and I certainly had a wobble on this film. And then, you know, you take your time a bit more and you realise, no, we've got this film, you know, we've found it, we've got it.
Like I said, I was really, really emotional in the screening, and I just didn't know much about Tish's life and what happened. I think a lot of people even responded how angry they were. When did Tish become more known, and do you think in some aspect your film has the impact to bring the story out to more people, and is that one of the things you wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, in her lifetime, it wasn't that, you know, she was completely unknown, because, you know, she very early on had exhibitions, and I suppose before she died, she was probably maybe a cult photographer that if you knew about her, you loved her, and it was probably a special group of people that, you know, I always think that, you know, there are, you know, cult films and cult artists and cult musicians that, although, you know, a lot of people might not know about them, the people that do cherish them, you know, and I think that can be sometimes just as important as having mass adulation. But then after Tish died, I mean, Ella has done a brilliant job. She's published 3 photography books of her mum's work and some of her writing in as well. And there was an exhibition at the Photographers Gallery, I think in 2017, that was a massive exhibition at the time, which was sort of retrospective on Tish's career. And I think now, though, with the film, hopefully it will, you know, make Tish's work more widely known. But also, as you were saying about watching it and feeling angry, I think it would be great if the film is a rallying cry, because, you know, the economic conditions and the societal inequality that Tish was, you know, documenting back in the 70s and 80s, it never really went away. I mean, I think it might have maybe diminished a bit, you know, at some moments, maybe in, you know, between 1997 and 2010 perhaps, but then certainly the situation that we're in now, where you've got, you know, 4.3 million children living in poverty in the UK, many of them, probably the majority of them in the north of England, it's still there. And these communities that were under, you know, the Conservative government, marginalised and, you know, underserved, that continued under New Labour. You know, they did a lot of good things, of course, but they, you know, didn't fix society. And they, with those 2 massive majorities, I still think they could have done a lot more. So in the present day, you know, the things, I suppose Tish's work has, you know, a circularity to it that, you know, 40 years on, the things that she was writing about and the things she was concerned about in terms of the youth unemployment and the abandonment of young people, it all came to pass, you know. And I don't, you know, she didn't predict Brexit because, you know, that wasn't on her mind. But certainly what she was warning against was if, you know, a generation of people are ignored, marginalised, and given these kind of opportunities that weren't really good for anything other than just, you know, cooking the books on employment statistics, then there would be repercussions, you know. And she warns of these reactionary and barbaric forces in our society and describes it as violence on a grand scale. And I suppose if you want to examine an element of Brexit, certainly it was people in communities in some instances that had felt ignored by politicians, ignored by Westminster for many, many years. And this was a chance to stick 2 fingers up at the establishment. And of course, they, you know, people that didn't want the sole reason for Brexit, because there's also a huge middle class vote down in the south of England that's responsible for that. But I think looking at how prescient she was, and, you know, how prescient the themes of her work still are today, I think it's going to resonate.
What is the life of Tish, the film? Its world premieres here. What are the plans now?
So there's another screening on the 22nd of June at Doc's Island in Belfast at QFT. And that's a great festival. I went there last year for the first time, and it's brilliant. I was really impressed with the films that I saw and the team. And, you know, just I love Belfast as well. I've got a couple of good friends over there that I'll, you know, be meeting up with. So I'm excited about that. And then looking to confirm an international premiere, wherever that may be. We've got ideas, but I don't want to sort of say any of them in case we don't get them and curse it. But I'd love it to have a festival journey, because the last film I directed, Polystyrene I'm a Cliche, had a festival journey, but it was all online, so it didn't really get to go anywhere. And it was all sort of doing Q&As on Zoom and in the middle of lockdown and whatnot. So I'd really like it if it could go around the world, and if I could get to see some places that I've not been to and some festivals I've not been to before.
And how about theatrical, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we've signed with Modern Films, who I worked with on Polly, and I think I would, we would be aiming to do a theatrical later this year, perhaps around November. Feels like a good time for it.
I mean, actually, the other question I was going to ask around that is, do you think you said 3 or 4 years to make this? Do you think that that to me doesn't actually seem that long to make a film, for a documentary film? And my second question is, what's next for you?
I mean, it was actually, I think, 3 years from first chatting to Ella to the film being pretty much finished in post, which 3 years can seem like a long time. I mean, what takes time is not necessarily making the film, it's getting the funding in. I think if we'd have got funding, all in one go up front, it probably would have only taken 18 months or 2 years. But it takes a while to get everything in place for these projects. So, yeah, I mean, and up next, I've been working on a documentary about Irvine Welsh, which is called Am I Irvine Welsh? We would like to sort of put that out next year. It's with LS Films. It's produced by Natasha Dack, who's a brilliant producer I've known for a few years, and who, along with Nikki Parrott, exec Polystyrene I'm a Cliche. So, yeah, that's what's next. I mean, a bit of a contrast going from, a working class female photographer in the Northeast to, one of Scotland's greatest, or one of the world's greatest writers. But I think, again, Irvine's somebody that, I mean, he has received his due. He's rightly celebrated. I still think in certain people's minds, if we call them like the literary establishment, why has Irvine never won the Booker? Trainspotting, I think, was actually taken off the Booker list, and it's class snobbery. They don't like voices like that, and certainly Irvine's someone who's always challenged the status quo. He's not somebody that doesn't speak out. And one of the things I like about Irvine is that he punches up. He never punches down. He punches up, and really excited to be making a film with him. We follow him around the world for around a year, and watch him kind of at work and at play. And it's one of the sort of projects that it's very different because Tish is in some ways an archive film. You've got present day stuff of Ella meeting people, but with Irvine it was happening as we were going along, and you can't plot those things too much, because you've got to have some freedom and some fluidity to be able to shift and change. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to finishing that. It's edited by Angela Slavin, who I worked with on Tish, and I think it's going to be a special film.
And final question: we're here at Sheffield Film Festival. You've been here many times. This is my first time in person, and but this is, as you said, and it's the first time you premiered a film here. And how does it feel to premiere at Sheffield? And how do you see this festival in terms of importance? Because I know you've been working on pitching other projects as well, in terms of UK landscape and documentaries. Yeah,
it's the first time I've had a film here, and to kind of go in and have the opening gala film, it's all downhill from now, isn't it, really? But it's wonderful. I mean, I've always loved this festival. I've been coming here since 2016. It's a friendly festival. I mean, the documentary community is generally very welcoming. And yeah, outside of the Northeast, if we were going to have a premiere somewhere, Sheffield's really appropriate. I'm really pleased that Raoul, Annabelle, Carmen and the team, selected us, because Sheffield, as far as cities go, places that suffered under deindustrialisation, and as far as cities go in terms of being friendly and I feel very working class, it's a great place. So yeah, coming here, and then was also in Meat Market to pitch a Spy Cops doc that we're doing as well, with a woman called Donna McLean, was great. It's been intense, because we had the premiere, then 2 days of solid meetings in Meat Market, and then there's another screening of Tish here at the festival tomorrow, and there's various other things going on. But it's a brilliant festival. I mean, it's easily my favourite festival in England. It's brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for taking the time to chat, and I'll see you back in Edinburgh. Brilliant. Thanks, Amanda.